Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for hanging with us to the home stretch here. I really appreciate it. My name is Austin Harrison. I am a PhD candidate studying housing and neighborhoods. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation and to hear so many great networkings and meetings and really people talking about the great work they can do for our community in our city. I have the privilege of introducing our final speaker of the day, Mr. Nathaniel Smith. He is the founder and chief equity officer of an incredible organization, Partnership for Southern Equity. Nathaniel Smith founded that group, and they have been advocating for instrumental ratification of a 15% set aside in the Atlanta Beltline. They've taken on utility companies and have done amazing work. And Nathaniel himself is a child of the Civil Rights Movement, an Atlanta native. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Urban Studies from Morehouse and a Master's of Science from the New School in New York. And I think PSC is really, their scope is all over the Southeast. And they've been no strangers to Memphis. They've been here before. And I think they walk the walk. They definitely don't just talk about it. And they will be the perfect person to really think about where do we go from here. So we've had a lot of great conversations. And we're going to bring Mr. Smith up now to talk about how we do that. So I'm going to bring up Mr. Smith.
So we're in the home stretch. I heard some clapping over there. Wait a minute. So I tell you, it has really been an honor for me to have an opportunity to sit and listen, and even more important, feel the potential that is embedded in this room for change. For you to make a decision to be here, to have a conversation about something as central and important as affordable housing is just incredible and really stellar in many ways. There's so many other things you could be doing right now, but for you to choose to be here, I say that you deserve a round of applause for that. So if you don't mind giving yourself a round of applause. You know, the challenges around affordable housing are daunting. You have to deal with market pressures. You also have to deal with individuals that may not necessarily understand the importance of people over profit. You also have to deal with a history of public investments that help to facilitate the spatial inequities that you see in communities. You sometimes even have to get community to show up for themselves, which makes it even more difficult. And under that, I will make a sub-bullet, the gatekeepers in communities that are more concerned about their well-being, although they articulate that they care about the well-being of the whole community. So the work around housing affordability is a daunting task to create a community where everybody can live and no one is forced out, right? A place for everyone. But guess what? For many of the people in this room, we come from a place of struggle. We come from a place of insurmountable odds. Anytime I have an opportunity to come to Memphis, I'm encouraged and inspired, because for as long as there is a city of Atlanta and a city of Memphis, we will always be connected. We will always be connected because we both have a connection to the dream. The dream of a society where everyone is looked at as an asset and no one is looked at as a liability. A dream that elevated not only the American South, but the world. When the Berlin Wall came down, they sang, "We shall overcome." They didn't even sing a native song because the power and the sacrifices that people in the American South made in order to what the civil rights movement leaders coined redeeming the soul of America. So we've been here before, and that connection between Memphis and Atlanta and this belief in what Dr. King called the beloved community, realizing that is not an easy thing to do. It takes sacrifice. It takes a commitment to something that is bigger than you. It takes an understanding that you may have to step away from some of the chicken dinners that you're invited to. Y'all know about the chicken dinners, right? And how that can be intoxicating to some of the people in our communities. That's the only way change is going to happen. We've got to be willing to not only make other people uncomfortable, but ourselves uncomfortable if we really want to see change. Now, you've had an opportunity to really learn about, what the definition of gentrification is and all of those important things. You've learned about some of the best practices that people are engaged in around the country. You've also had a chance, hopefully, to meet somebody you didn't know. If you didn't, then, hey, that's your fault. You should have tried to meet someone that you didn't know. But now, we're at this point of action. Beyond the rubbing the elbows and the pontificating about what you know, where the rubber meets the road is where change is really going to happen in this community, right? And people are watching you because you have an opportunity to do something that unfortunately Atlanta did not do. And that is anticipate the growth and change that was coming. I mean, you have a chance to learn from the challenges that we've had to go through. Being in a lava-hot market where public subsidies actually facilitated gentrification, right? Where, you hear about tax increment financing. In the South, we call that tax allocation districts. In Atlanta, there have been circumstances where people have been put in a position to subsidize their own displacement. That is the work of ensuring that if public dollars are used, that the people who put into those coffers should benefit from it. The work around ensuring that you are controlling the land, whether it be through community land trusts, the land banks, controlling the land, because once the land is gone, you can't get it back. So what are the policies and the advocacy efforts you're going to advance in order to control the land? For many of my friends in development, you know the people who own something in these meetings and the people who don't. The people who own something are the ones that the people in power listen to. When you own land, people listen, especially if the people who don't own land aren't organized. So you gotta own something, and you gotta push your public representatives to work to ensure that they're using your public dollars as a way to ensure that equity is fully realized. Equity is not fully realized by just building stadiums like we did in Atlanta, or building large infrastructure projects like the Beltline. Equity isn't realized through that. Equity is realized through the people. And that is why if the people aren't put at the center of development, then you're not going to get what you want to accomplish through your development efforts. If the most vulnerable people in this city aren't put at the center of the decision making, and if the people who have the greatest risk of being pushed out because of progress, if they're not positioned in a way to be at the table in a strong way, then you might as well get ready for what we're dealing with in Atlanta right now. So it's going to take not just innovations in policy. It's also going to take what Dr. King called a revolution of values. The people have to be valued, as I said before, more than profit. The experiences of individuals have to be just as valuable as that individual with a PhD behind their name, because they have wisdom as well. I've learned just as much from the mothers in my community that graduated with an old lordy degree than someone that graduated cum laude. So we've got to level the playing field. We have to reconnect with the community and level the playing field as it relates to how things are done in this community. And no other place can you really learn about the history of injustice and specifically structural racism than the history of affordable housing. If you're not willing to talk about race, and even more so racism, then it's going to be difficult for you to do the affordable housing work that needs to be done in Memphis.
All right.
I mean, I'm just going to tell you. Unfortunately, if Dr. King was not murdered in Memphis, we wouldn't have a Fair Housing Act. We wouldn't. I'm just going to be honest with you. Many of the progresses that we made, we wouldn't have. The civic sacrifices that you made in order for the country to move forward now has to realize itself through the work that you do here. And that's going to take courage. That's going to take real courage. It's going to take intellectual fortitude, and it's going to take relationships, and it's going to take good research, and all of those great things, but even more so, it's going to take courage. Are you willing to step out there and do the things that need to be done in order to create the communities that you believe everybody deserves to live in? So I know I got a few more minutes and we're going to have a conversation, but I just wanted to kind of frame my thinking, and hopefully what I am sharing is assisting you also in thinking about next steps for Memphis. And, you know, of course, I'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, to talk a little bit about the work of the Partnership of Southern Equity. But more than anything, I have faith in you all. I know that you all can do it, because that is all we know. That's all we know. You know, I sit in these rooms with these intellectuals, and now they're using all of these terms like resilience. Resilience. What can you tell an old black woman about resilience who's had to raise children on minimum wage and figure out a way to pay their light bills and their phone bills and their gas bill? What can you tell that woman about resilience? So there are things that we have to be able to undo and recreate. And really, that is what this work is about. Because guess what? As a great person said in the past, you can't build your house of freedom with the master's tools. So what type of tools are you going to create? Are you going to continue to sit at other people's tables, or are you going to create your own? That's up to you. So I just wanted to begin my talk with that. Hopefully that will assist you in understanding where I'm coming from. And if I made some people in this room uncomfortable already, good. Because you need it. Even if you don't realize it, you need it. Because it's the only way that real change happens. So thank you. I know we're going to sit down and have a conversation.
All right, let's give it up for actually had an opportunity this spring. I was in Atlanta and PSE had sponsored a summit, and it was very similar to this. This was actually inspired by some of the work that they did there, and I was really just blown away with the level of engagement. When we were there was a big development that everybody kept talking about. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a big $1 billion development. Kind of reminds me of what we talk about Union Road here.
I think the Gulch.
The Gulch, that's exactly what it was. And there was a lot of conversation about gentrification and the impacts on the neighborhood. Before we get started, just for my sake, can you tell me what's going on with that project now?
Yeah, I mean, the Gulch is just a large, one of the large plots of land in the community that hasn't been, in the city of Atlanta proper, that has not been developed, and the city has utilized a great deal of tax dollars and tax incentives to facilitate really the development of that community. And there are really, really major concerns about what will happen once that large development is done, and whether that will, again, help to facilitate gentrification in the community. And so you have various leaders that have been organizing around the Gulch, but there's so many things happening right now in Atlanta. The Gulch is just one of them.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I want to get to, we're going to keep this to 15 minutes to get everybody out of here at 3 o'clock. So I just have a couple of quick questions, and I'd love to, anybody else has any questions, and then we'll wrap up. The work that, I often say, you just kind of alluded to this when you were talking, that right now is a pivotal time in the history of this city. We don't want to be caught off guard like it seems Atlanta and Nashville, where in terms of how development has just somewhat spiraled out of control. What examples have you seen since you're there in Atlanta and you're in the thick of it? What examples are you seeing that give you hope for how affordable housing can move forward in your community?
So in order for affordable housing to occur, the first thing that you need is capital. You've got to have money in order to develop affordable housing at the level that a city like Atlanta requires. And so one of the things I'm really excited about is that the mayor of Atlanta has made a $1 billion commitment to raising $1 billion for affordable housing. It's going to be critical in Memphis where you all have a similar commitment. It may not be $1 billion because I think you're in a good place right now. But not only in terms of this understanding of the need for capital, but also a clear understanding of what does the housing delivery system look like in Memphis, right? Because you can provide capital, but if that capital if you're continuing to leverage that capital to create a dysfunctional delivery system, then you're going to continue to have similar issues. So we're doing a lot of work around looking at what that housing delivery system should look like. What is the role of the nonprofit development community? What is the role of the for-profit development community? How can those dollars be used to accumulate land? Another thing that we're really excited about is that we have a community land trust in Atlanta, the Atlanta Land Trust, Community Land Trust, which is really beginning the process of really advancing this whole idea around shared equity housing, right? So again, ownership of the land. Our land bank is also doing a lot of great work around acquiring land. So that would be another recommendation I would make, that, try to purchase as much of the land as you can before the market begins to shift. And then this other key piece that I think is really important is public policy. Regardless of, how difficult it may be, it's gonna be really important for you to think about policies like inclusionary zoning, right? And other policies, inclusionary housing and other policies that will set the preconditions. And like we were talking earlier, some of it is not as outward facing as, an inclusionary zoning ordinance. It could be, how can you fast track developers that are building, affordable housing through the permitting process? Or how can you find ways to minimize parking requirements in a way that will create more affordable units? So it's about being innovative, but I think that last but certainly not least, and this is the work of PSC, it has to boil down to building power in community, right? Leadership development, community organizing, creating the conditions for the people to stand up and say, this is the type of community that we want, and we're willing to fight for it. Being at the table, there used to be this conversation about, well, we gotta have a seat at the table. We gotta have a seat at the table. Well, that's important. But if you're at the table, you don't have anything to talk about, right? Then you're taking up space. So what are you doing to build your own intellectual capacity? And what are the nonprofits in the community doing to actually build a cadre of leaders? Our organization, we have 4 leadership development programs where we're working to really build the capacity and support leaders, frontline leaders in community to speak for themselves.
And I was just give it up for him. I was just getting ready to ask you to tell us a little bit more about what all you're doing at PSC, which you just started to touch on. But if you could elaborate a little more on some of the things that you guys have going, and you all think about your questions, because I'm going to you all next.
Yeah, I'm going to be extremely quick because there are a lot of things. There are 4 areas that we work in: economy, growth, health, and climate. I mean, those are the primary areas. And we center all of the work that we do in racial equity, right? So we believe that structural racism has played a role in creating the conditions of injustice, in particular for low-wealth communities and communities of color. So just quickly, one quick thing that we're doing, which I think is really important for you all too. I don't know how many of you are aware that Memphis has the highest energy burden of any city in the country. How many people know that? So people have a higher energy burden in Memphis than any other place in the country. So it's one thing to talk about affordable housing, but if people can't pay their light bill, then what are you doing to ensure, right, that the housing that you are developing is energy efficient, right? So we have a whole portfolio that is focused on what we call energy equity, where we're advancing an agenda. We actually have a campaign where we are protesting against our utility company now called the Fight the Hype campaign, where they're trying to increase our utility bills by $200 a year for the people in the community, and for people on fixed income. It's just not possible. I mean, we can't accept that. So we've organized several organizations to work to develop that and encourage that agenda around that. On our equitable development front, we're in the process now of developing something called the Equitable Development Implementation Tool, where we're developing a decision support framework for community as well as developing community and government to always center development in the city of Atlanta with a lens of equity. So we're beta testing it now with some of our development partners, and we're beginning to work together on that. We also have, on our economic inclusion front, we're beginning to do a lot of advocacy work around public finance, right? So how is public money being used to the benefit of the community? But on the flip side of that, we actually have a roundtable of about 7 corporations in the city of Atlanta that are now working with us on trying to solve this question of how does the corporate community begin to engage in this conversation about racial equity, to begin to have a deeper conversation about that. So, we're doing work from those areas to working in rural Georgia around the health equity challenges that we're facing. So our work is pretty robust in terms of its diversity, but it all is connected, right? The people that you serve in this audience, they don't have a education problem on Monday, a housing problem on Tuesday, a transportation problem on Wednesday, and a climate problem on Thursday. They have those problems every day, right? So we've got to find a way to work in that way where we look at the intersectional aspects of the challenges that they go through, and that's what we try to do at PSC.
Great. Well, I want to open it up for any questions. I'm going to go in the back. Roby Williams there.
Thanks. Greetings, everybody. You answered my question pretty much, but the original question I was going to ask you is how do we develop strategies such that we are included in the decision-making unit among the people who make the decisions about what's going to happen to properties here? Now, what I want to know, I want to know about your framework for developing leaders at every CDC, and we want to implement that in Memphis. So do you have something with you that you can leave with me?
Well, actually, my VP of Strategy of Engagement, I can't leave him. I'm not going to leave him here with me. So I want you to know that's not going to happen. Okay? But my VP of Strategy and Engagement, Dwayne Patterson, is actually here. And what he can talk to you about is one of our leadership programs. It's called the Resident Leaders for Equity program, where we're actually training leaders in the community in a way that is centered in understanding the relationship between structural racism and the built environment. So Dwayne can talk to you a little bit about that curriculum and be more than happy to do
And
that.
then talk to Roshan Austin and have her replicate meeting with Roshan Austin in every community in this country.
Okay. That sounds great to me. That sounds great by me.
I took my daughter on, and she's in Atlanta in college now, but I took her on a college tour when I was filming in Morehouse in Clark a couple of years ago.
Good schools.
She's at Oglethorpe, but
Well, that's good schools.
well, what was startling when we were on that visit, there was the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and there were those universities in the areas around them in a lot of decline. What efforts are you all making? I know somewhat is after the fact, and you've already kind of mentioned Atlanta kind of got behind that and should have been ahead of it. What's happening in that area now? Because I haven't been back to that area since that time, but it was very startling that those neighborhoods were so declined, and then there was Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Well, I think you laid it out. Mercedes-Benz Stadium came, a $1.5 billion stadium. And so work is being done to protect that investment. You have a lot of people, Arthur Blank and other people that are investing money in the West Side. There's a great deal of money being pumped into that community. But in my opinion, none of it is really being utilized in a way to build a civic agency, right, of community residents. On the affordable housing front and community building front, a lot of times we focus a lot on the physical infrastructure of communities. We've got to be just as committed to developing the civic infrastructure of communities. And I don't think they've done a good job with that. And we as an organization have chosen not to be involved in what is happening on the West Side. But there are some organizations that are attempting to move forward and help to facilitate some level of change in that community. But again, one of the things that we have, there are many, many questions that we have to think about, especially in the affordable housing space. Like, for example, why does the majority of money for affordable housing come from tax benefits? LIHTC, every major way that housing is being developed right now is being developed with an incentive for wealthy people to invest in developing housing for people. So we've got to think differently about how the game has been developed or designed that kind of creates the situation that we're in. We wouldn't have, like the gentleman said that spoke before, we wouldn't have gentrification in these communities if those communities were invested in before, right? Gentrification occurs when markets come into communities that have been disinvested in, right? So that's one thing. The third thing that we have to be honest about is that no market should be exclusively primarily influenced by where white people choose to live. That's how markets are primarily designed and developed. You can look around. Where white people choose to live is where markets follow, right? It should, and that's why the conversation about race is so critical and important if you're really serious about doing community development.
One more question.
No one? Oh, thank you.
I listened as you talked about the development of neighborhood leaders and some of the things that you're doing. I guess I want to bring up a little hot topic and just kind of hear your voice on it. Our Shelby County mayor proposed a tax on households that had 3 or more cars. I think it was $145 would have been added for those households. And his explanation for it was so that could go towards upgrading our transit and making it better for the folks who are using it, and for all of us ultimately. It has been met with just like daggers everywhere I go. I can't have a civil conversation with people about it. However, I saw that as such innovative leadership to step out the box and say, okay, let's really do something about this. If we really want to see some change, put your money where your mouth is, somebody, right? And even when he was elected, and this is not a promo for him, I'm just kind of saying the thing, he said he wanted to reduce poverty by 50,000 persons in Shelby County. And I just saw that as a direct threat to a way to help do that. And yet it's looking like that's not going to pass, that tax that he's proposed, because people are like, I ain't giving them $145, right? So any thoughts on how you're developing leadership that can be bold and courageous, and how we can then ultimately use that to help folks like Paul, who have gone on the carpet for us as well to get this affordable housing trust fund? And if we want to keep seeing that kind of leadership, what do we need to be doing in Memphis to help that happen?
Well, I think again, there's another leadership program that we have, well, two in particular I want to elevate, the Just the Energy Academy, where actually folks in Memphis can apply. It's a region-wide leadership program where we're training folks on how to get involved in the climate justice movement in a way that's centered in racial equity. And we have another leadership program that's focused on transit-oriented development. I am all invited to a lot of conversations around smart growth and smart cities. And I always preface my feedback on the panels, on my talks, with one question. And that is, can a city be truly smart if it's not just? Can a city be smart if it's not just? And that's why you have to be really careful about these smart growth policies, because a city like Portland, for example, right, has an urban growth boundary. They have all of these things that are encouraging smart growth, but what it has done, it has created a market, right? Because their policies around affordable housing and equitable development haven't kept up with their smart growth policies. So it's really, really important that if you are going to focus on a smart growth trajectory, or smart cities trajectory, or resilience trajectory, it's important to embed that work in equity, right? You've got to begin to ask real questions, and even more so, as you said, be proactive in really growing the leadership infrastructure, right, or what we call ecosystem, that is able to engage in the work. And let me be clear, there are folks in positions of influence that need training too, right? So you assume that just by you getting trained, and not you, I'm just saying in general, that if we just get trained in the community, that everything will work itself out. But there are people inside that want to help, but don't know how, right? So what is the work that we have to do around connecting with those people and creating conditions for them to be willing to be courageous? Because some of the greatest stories that I have aren't just about courage, the courage of people outside in community to push against injustice that is occurring, to them, but also the willingness for people inside of systems of inequity that have been in comfortable positions, that have been willing to stand up and say, this is not right. You all have to find a way to connect to those people as well, because if you're not connected to that, it's going to be real difficult to be successful.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up, because I committed to trying to have everybody out by 3, but it might be 3:15. But I appreciate everybody sticking in here. Let's give it up for Mr. Smith one more time. It was important to me that we ended the conference talking about people. And I didn't even tell him what to talk about, but when I saw him in Atlanta, I knew that he was gonna come in here and talk about people. Because as we talk about housing, we get sometimes caught up into all the incentives and the structures and the tools that we need to get things built. But if the people that go into the housing units aren't built up as well, then the housing units will look the same way they look today in 20 years. And the families will be no better off. So, as we leave today and as we close and we think about where we go from here, I want us to be committed to working for the people. It was important that we held this event so that we can all get a shared understanding of what our challenges are, hear some solutions and some strategies. I think we've heard great things today. I didn't sit in any of the sessions for the full time, but the time that I was in there, everybody was engaged, and I heard great feedback on what was shared with everyone. So I just want to thank you all for being here. Many of you I saw at 8:30, and you're still here at 3:15. So y'all give it up for yourselves. I want to thank our sponsors again for partnering with us to pull this event off. All of the booth vendors that participated, that sat out in the hallway sharing information. This is something that we're going to continue to do. We want to make sure that we are excelling as a city. At this critical point in our juncture, we can't just let things happen by chance. We have to be thoughtful about how we want to see our city grow. This can't be a one-time conversation. This has to be an ongoing dialogue. So when we talk about where we're going to go from here, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep having the dialogue. We're going to keep doing the things that advance our community. Ashley Cash started off the morning talking about the Housing Trust Fund that we've established that's out on the streets right now. If you're a nonprofit that wants to apply to do home repairs, our goal is to have agencies that are established all across the city. So we'd like to have a nonprofit in Fraser be the entity that you call if you need home repairs. We've been talking about how one of our biggest challenges is the poor quality of our housing stock. I get a call every week from some elderly resident in the city who can't afford to pay for the repairs. We can't just not do anything about it. If these communities are going to see growth, we need to ensure that the people that are in the community today can stay there in their houses of quality as well. And so we have tools like the trust fund, the catalyst fund, other things that we're deploying, but we have to continue to do it smart. We have to partner with all of you in this room. We need real estate agents, brokers, NAREB. I appreciate, shout out to NAREB for representing hard, agencies like NAREB, MAR, THDA, all the agencies that participate in the spectrum of housing. We want to continue to partner with you to make great things happen for the residents of this city. So with that said, I want to adjourn us, and I want to say thank you to everyone